more. I'm Jason Fitz, and it's time for Zero Blitz. Welcome to Zero Blitz. I'm Jason Fitz, and you know we like to bring in all sorts of experts. We start right out of the gates with somebody that's not only going to talk to us about football, but also talk to us about horror movie contraptions. The Ringer's Austin Gayle joining us. Hey, man, thanks for the time. Appreciate you hanging out with me. We're going to have a little bit of fun today, brother.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
No, we'll get to football. Everybody relax. Take a deep breath. Calm down. Okay. Let's start with the most important thing is I'm like sitting here wearing a Scream shirt. You know, I'm that horror movie junkie. You just put a piece out on the Ringer that ranks all of the killings, all of the contraptions in the Saw franchise. But here's what's interesting. You didn't rank them in gore or like overall good, if that's a word you can use for Saw. You ranked them in your ability to escape the trap. Okay, step number one, though, I read every piece of this riveted because I went to see Saw opening night, right? Like, I'm that guy. Saw 10, I saw opening night. What I thought was interesting is you presumed that horror movies include common sense. And that might be your fatal flaw, man.
Honestly, that's a great take because I did put a Google sheet together where I found myself surviving 44% of the 73 traps. And I was like, that's too high. That's too high for Jigsaw. That's too high for his copycats like Amanda and Hoffman and all these things. I do think when I was going through it, the amount of times I'm like, this is lame. This is stupid. Like, you have to have common sense here to get out. And when I was initially pitching this to editors, one, they were like, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you sure you want to do this? Because this is going to be a grind. And then two, they were like, well, we don't want to rank it on gore. We don't want to rank it on like how cool something is because I think a lot of people have already done that. And there is like in my survivability rankings, some bonus points awarded for some of the cool, like really hard to escape or really gory traps. But a lot of the traps at the top of the rankings, like the most survivable traps are ones that like it's a dream sequence or a vision. And there's others where all you got to do is break, 3 or 4 of your fingers. Like, let's get out of this, man. Let's make some plays. And I think that it was a lot of fun going through that process because I think that's the question everyone asks in Saw movies. Maybe not the first one, because the first one was a little bit different, but as we progress through what is now a 10-movie series, everyone was saying, can I get out of that? Wait, maybe I could get out of that? And I think that I actually asked that question 73 times, and it was fun.
I will say a couple of things that stand out to me. One, you're right. If I got to spin a dial to break some fingers, I'm just spinning all the way across. Like, exactly. In one move, I'm like, bang, take my fingers. We'll figure that out. But here's the real, like, shows the difference in our personalities and, frankly, something I should probably work on. You're looking at it saying, how can I survive this? I'm looking at it saying, this is the one every horror movie has a fatal flaw. Every horror franchise, as a lover, as a fanatic of them, everyone except for maybe Scream, which perfectly lays everything out. There are fatal flaws to all of them in the plot line. The fatal flaw in this one is like, if I'm in a room, and I'm tied up to some sort of torture device. And I've watched other people in the room go through graphic, awful deaths after they hurt themselves in every possible way. And now you hand me this same opportunity. Like, I'm going to off myself right away. Like, there is no like fight or flight. There's neither. I'm just like, look, if I have to make the choice between removing portions of my brain or just offing myself, I'm just going to off myself. Like, I give up.
I don't think that's a bad take, honestly. And I don't think we need to do a psychoanalysis of that. I think that's a lot of the times where you're kind of sitting there, like I found myself saying, taking the loss and just like, dude, I don't want to do this to myself. I'm just going to, die here in 60 seconds or 90 seconds or how much time Jigsaw gives you. I think other pieces that stood out to me is that there are so many times in these movies, and like they made a movie every year for 7 years, where in the timeline, Jigsaw is a known killer, a known like serial murderer and torturer. He's in the newspaper, he's on TV. And every time they get in these traps, like, I don't know, it could be different. Maybe that sign that says don't leave, I could try and get out. It's like, it's the common sense piece of it by like Saw 6, Saw 7, where I think the fact is Saw 7 was not written as a 3D movie. And then late in the process, they're like, we need some more money on this. We're going to make it a 3D movie. And then like that whole part of it makes those movies hard to watch, honestly, for more reasons than just the gore and the traps. But we can talk this all day.
Yeah. By the way, this is also my favorite flaw. Like, I spent a lot of my life on a tour bus in country music, and you'd be amazed at how often on a tour bus in country music, zombie apocalypse comes up, because maybe you're like in the middle of a 27-hour drive and you have no idea what to do. The number of times I've sat there in the zombie apocalypse conversation where it's like, well, this guy would do this, and be like, well, I got my guns, I could take care of this. I'm like, y'all have a much different approach, because I would simply open the door, I'd look around and be like, this is a zombie apocalypse. I close the door, I take a bunch of drugs, drink, and then just see like, all right, you know what? I'm going to go out my way. I'm not going to get eaten. I'm just saying I'm going to go out my way. For all of that, maybe part of the reason I have this just lay down and take it mentality is because we share something else in common other than a love of Saw. And that's the fact that we're both Raiders fans. So before we get into a little bit of fun on this season, hear me out. Okay. 1-3 right now. Not good. The next 3 games for the Raiders, the Packers on Monday night, right? They got the Patriots in this. They got the Bears on this. 3 straight winnable games. The Raiders could win 3 straight and everything would be glorious again. Tell me I'm wrong.
The problem is you're not wrong, right? And I've said this before, but I fear purgatory more than I fear hell in Las Vegas. Like, it is the constant kicking the can down the road with this group, with Dave Ziegler, the GM, with Josh McDaniels, the head coach, who you're seeing viral videos of fans screaming in Mark Davis's face to fire Josh McDaniels, a coach that if he loses these next 2 games will be bottom 10 in winning percentage among any head coach since 1990. Like, he is not performing at the level that the leash he has, right? And then you think about the decisions this team has made in tandem with Ziegler and McDaniels to restructure the Jimmy Garoppolo contract where they can't get out of it next year. So maybe he is the starter or a very expensive backup next year after they draft a rookie quarterback who, if he's if the backup rookie quarterback doesn't start next year, then McDaniels gets another year to see that first year. And then it's just this constant kicking the can down the road of mediocrity that the Raiders and Mark Davis can't escape, because a lot of the decisions ownership has made. And I worry that it is a couple wins, right? It is a couple wins that get people more excited, that get people back on this train of McDaniels, when what's ultimately probably going to happen, the most likely outcome in this range of outcomes is 7, 8, 9-win season, narrowly missing the playoffs, and giving McDaniels another opportunity, maybe a 3rd quarterback in 3 years to right the ship. That scares me. It's not next week. It's not these next few weeks. It's definitely the next year and the year after that. How much longer are we going to look at a division that is loaded with quarterback talent, that every year we're probably going to be ranked 4th in odds to win the division, and not make an aggressive play to improve the coaching situation, improve the GM situation, obviously improve the quarterback position?
The only fear that I have, because I'll use your Saw analogy, like fans see it in the paper and they still this is what we're doing, right? Like, I'm still seeing it in the paper. The only fear that I have is that whoever comes in next will still be hired by the same person that hired this regime. So like, this is what I ask every fan of every team that's stuck in mediocrity or worse, like a big old barrel of suck. I always tell them one thing. What do you do when the person in charge of your big old barrel of suck just isn't good at finding great people to hire? Now, all of a sudden, it's like, great, I can make my owner fire this guy and hire somebody else. Why is it going to be any different? That's the hardest part. Now, that being said, as much as I want to sit here and, shit all over Mark Davis and the job that he's done there, let's also acknowledge that the Vegas Aces look like they could be on the precipice of a 2nd straight title. So like, he's doing it there. He found the right big name coach. He found the right stars. He paid all the money that he needs to pay. It's just none of that acumen and none of that ability to simply outspend everybody is there in the NFL side of it. So the definition of insanity, I think, in this might not even be about Josh McDaniels. It might be about sitting down at the steakhouse again with some new candidate with Mark Davis and figuring, well, this is going to be the guy that gets it. But that being said, the Texans somehow did it, right? The Texans did nothing but screw this up over and over again. So now they've somehow done it. Maybe that's our hope.
The positive, and this is probably like my most positive viewpoint or perspective of the Raiders organization right now, is I do think Mark Davis has tried to give up any influence on the roster decisions and who is starting, who's not starting, any influence with the decisions he's made. He signed John Gruden to a 10-year contract with no expectations it would end the way it did. And as soon as it did, he wanted to give him everything. Like, just fix this team for me, man. I'll worry about us moving to Vegas. I'll make us now back-to-back seasons the highest pay or highest revenue through ticket sales. I'll do that side. I need someone to take this team and win them. And then obviously Gruden, you have to move on from John Gruden. You bring in Josh McDaniels. Not a good decision there either. But it's different than other owners who want to constantly influence the decisions of a GM or constantly influence the decisions of a head coach. He is not doing that, in my opinion. He is trying to get the best person in and then praying, I think, that they figure it out. Now, the problem is that he's made 2 back-to-back poor decisions, right? Poor decision with John Gruden ended a way he could not have expected. And now another poor decision with Josh McDaniels that he does not want to be quick to nip in the bud, probably for financial reasons and other reasons as well. And he just doesn't want to worry about it anymore. In my opinion, that's how I see it. I think Mark Davis doesn't want to worry about it. Now, if he does get to this next stage and he does want to take another swing at the back at hiring a head coach, here's my hope. I'm interested in your perspective on this. I've been talking to my friends in the group chats from the high school and all this stuff. Give me Jimmy. I want Jim Harbaugh back in the league. I want him with the Raiders. Then you convince Mike McDonald, defensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens, who previously worked with Jim Harbaugh, yes, to make a lateral move, but a lateral move to Las Vegas. I'm hoping for more pay under Jim Harbaugh. That, to me, offensive coordinator, maybe we bring Lane Kiffin back for a redemption tour. I don't know. I'm getting my hopes up over that right now. Now, that's such a big swing of the bat that Mark Davis, I don't think, can financially or realistically wrap his head around, because that would be third big swing that if it doesn't pan out, it just starts to look worse and worse. But man, I do think that they need this injection of newness and also this injection of proven winning. Jim Harbaugh, when he was in the NFL, was a proven winner. Now at Michigan, and I know it hasn't always been good, but of late, a proven winner. I think they need to bring in someone like that.
The thing I will say is that star power will always matter in Vegas, because at the end of the day, you're competing against the Strip, and everything that happens there, you're trying to still build in a new market. For that reason, I don't hate trying to find somebody that's proven. Plus, every single time we do this, it's like the draft, and none of it's a proven entity. So we'll move on to a little game that we want to play here. I think you'll get the meaning of what we're going to do, but we're going to do the ever famous. Every conversation is always this: start, bench, cut. Now, this is the clean version of the game we all know: start, bench, cut. So I'm going to give you 3 people in each scenario. You get to start one, you got to bench one, and you got to cut one. All right, so this is very simple. We're going to go through a bunch of different scenarios and a bunch of different teams. Are you ready to decide to start, bench, and cut? The good news is you don't have to decide to sleep with any of them. It's just start, bench, cut. Are you ready with me, AG?
That works for me. I'm excited.
Okay, we'll start with young quarterbacks, and we'll go specifically to this year's draft. I'm going to give you start, bench, cut: Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud, Bryce Young.
Man, that's tough. I think the obvious cut is Bryce Young. He hasn't looked good, and I don't think he's in a situation where you can effectively evaluate him right now, especially every play and looking at some of the stuff where receivers aren't getting open versus man coverage. He's constantly have to force the ball to Adam Thielen, who even in the peak of his career was a number 2 receiver for Minnesota, and I would not argue he's in the peak of his career. That's why you're seeing public reports, a very aggressive public reports, that they're chasing a number 1 receiver. Not necessarily to improve this team right now, but it's hard to evaluate Bryce Young right now. It's hard to evaluate him behind this offensive line. It's hard to evaluate him with this receiving core. And I think you have to cut him right now just because these other 2 quarterbacks are playing better. The real decision comes to, do you bench CJ Stroud or do you bench Anthony Richardson? And I think because of how good and how consistent CJ Stroud is, I'm going to give him the start, though I do think that there are times where I'd rather have Anthony Richardson. I think you bench him now. The injuries are a concern. I think you still haven't seen him deliver the football with variability in throw power. So much of his throws are this same speed fastball that are leading to inaccuracy. It's leading to inconsistency and all that stuff. Whereas Stroud, you're getting such a good version of Stroud in this Bobby Slowick offense behind what is a bad offensive line that is injury plagued, which is a fine receiving core. I'd argue bottom 5, bottom 10 in the league in terms of when you factor in experience and proven ability, but he is maximizing what Slowick is putting on the table. He has confidence in the pocket, and the calmness is something that is a big tip of the cap to D'Amico Ryans and Bobby Slowick for putting him in a position where he can feel calm and collected and controlled in an offense where maybe things shouldn't be. CJ Stroud is the obvious start, I guess. With the benching, Richardson has more to prove. I think there's a look at this 5 years down the road where Anthony Richardson is the best quarterback of this class because he refined some things and there's more consistency with his accuracy. But 4 weeks in, CJ Stroud earns the start.
To me, if you've gone on 4 dates and they've been 4 of the best dates in the history of mankind,
yes.
Even if you look over and say, man, you know what? She's really hot. I've gone on 4 of the with she's beautiful, and they've been 4 of the best dates of all time. CJ Stroud to me is clear on this as the one that you start. Anthony Richardson becomes the one you bench, and that might change in 5 years. But the other part of this is the fact is, if you asked all of us 3 months ago who was getting it right, you had the choice between D'Amico Ryans and the Texans, who have a history of getting it wrong, like we just mentioned at the coaching position, then taking CJ Stroud, and people wanted to find questions about CJ Stroud, or Frank Reich, who seemed to be just Teflon when it came to some of the quarterback problems that they had with the Colts. Everybody just was like, it's fine, pay no attention. Now you got a situation here where I don't think Frank Reich is doing a great job of giving Bryce Young the great success, the great opportunity to be successful, I should say. Bryce doesn't look like much so far, hard to tell tell, but so far. So I'm looking at one organization that got it right with the coach and got it right with the quarterback, and they seem to have gotten everything right. Now they have momentum with C.J. Stroud and the Texans versus Bryce Young. I can't believe I'm saying this right now, but you're right. Like, the cut on here is clear, and it's Bryce Young. And that's the first overall pick in the draft. And let's not get it twisted. It's not the cut because of his size. Like, it's not, oh, well, he's a little short. It's the cut because he hasn't looked good enough. Like, that's the shocking part in this to me.
I also think, to kind of carry that 4 dates analogy, there are games or dates where the date has not shown up. And they can't because of all these reasons, right? Like, traffic is throwing to Adam Thielen on every play. You have being late, being the offensive line. Like, there's so much wrong with the system he's in from a talent perspective. I push back a bit on like what Frank Reich is doing. I think what they're doing to try and prop him up and put him in a position to succeed is fine. Maybe not the level that Bobby Slowick is doing. I think that Shanahan tree like can't miss right now. But Frank Reich, I think, is doing a fine job with the limitations of Bryce Young, right? There are certain things that Bryce Young, because of his size, can't do that a CJ Stroud can do or an Anthony Richardson can do. But within those limitations, I think it's fine. The problem has been, obviously, receivers aren't getting open. And the offensive line is like horrendous and getting hurt every single week. Like, there's a ton of injuries along that offensive line as well. It's making it so difficult that to evaluate their number 1 overall pick that they're publicly airing out reports that they're looking for a receiver. Like, you never see that stuff, right? You never see the specificity of that report where like they're looking for a number 1 wide receiver and are willing to trade draft capital to go get one. It's like a GM essentially emailing everybody he knows. Like, he's like, I need to go get a guy. I need to go get somebody. I don't care who knows. I don't care when this leaks. I honestly need this to leak. So some receivers start thinking about it, or some teams start thinking about it. So I do hope that they do pull something like that off. Now, you look back at some of the decisions they made around trading DJ Moore and not adding talent in the offseason. There's some of that too, but I hope they can add a star receiver, or not even a star receiver, like a true number 1, even just one of the true number 1s in the league on a team that is looking to part ways with one or for whatever. So you just get more opportunities to see Bryce Young show up to these dates.
By the way, this is like sending out a mass text at once. It's like, you up to everybody. It's just like, you up. Yes. Just shooting my shot here. All right, let's go to 1 and 3 teams with the start, bench, cut mindset. 1 and 3 teams. I'm going to give you 3 of them. You got to start, bench, and cut. The Jets, the Patriots, the Bengals. And I'm talking about for this season, not for the next 5. The Jets, the Patriots, the Bengals this year.
The Jets, the Patriots, the Bengals. I think that it's tough, right? I think the 2 candidates I'm thinking about most are Jets and Bengals. One of those has to be cut, and one of those has to be benched. I think about the Patriots, though. Do you just cut them because they have no plan? I'm cutting the Patriots. Screw it. I'm cutting the Patriots because I just don't see the way out here. It is a situation where ownership cannot move on from a head coach, and I'm not saying they should, but they can't move on from their head coach or their GM because they're the same person and they've won more Super Bowls than any other head coach in NFL history. Like, you are hamstrung in that position to where like you have to do what he says, right? Like, you do not want to be the owner that fires Bill Belichick. Come on, it's not going to happen. So you're writing Bill Belichick ride or die, and you're also writing his son ride or die, right? That Steve Belichick's the defense coordinator. Like, the offensive, you have the head coach, the GM, and the defense coordinator, all with the Belichick last name that you I don't think physically can move on from. Then you throw in the fact that they've invested in Mac Jones and he has been fine. I wouldn't say he's been terrible. I wouldn't even say he's been below average. I think he's been dead on average. So how they've invested around him, the receiving talent, the offensive line talent, has not been fine. And that's a big factor when Bill Belichick, the GM, has done such a poor job of building up this offensive roster. Like, the offensive line is not good. The receiving core is not good. They invested in Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry that one offseason. Jonnu Smith's not even on this team anymore. This, to me, is more malpractice on Bill Belichick, the GM, than anything he's done as a head coach. But at a certain point, that's where these questions come up. And I think you just have to cut them right now. Like, you know where they're ending up. Like, you know where the Patriots are ending up. With the Bengals, you bench them for now. And you probably bench Joe Burrow for now. You have to sit this guy. Because when you look at the offense, and this is from Mike Renner, one of my former podcast co-hosts, he's been watching the All-22 a lot, and he sees they've essentially have a playbook with X amount of plays. And now it's 0.5X because they've taken all of the plays out where Joe Burrow is asked to move, right? Because they don't want to risk an Achilles injury. One subtle movement, one extra movement on that calf, and it's done. But they didn't add any plays back in. Like, they didn't add any other stuff back in. So now you have half a playbook with a lot of predictability in that, and opposing defenses, especially ones that are well coached like Mike Vrabel's, you're not even putting up more than 3 points against those teams. So they have to be benched. Joe Burrow has to be benched. that leaves me starting the Jets. I guess I'm starting the Jets from a content perspective. I think that Zach Wilson's latest start was encouraging for all of the funny reasons, and that like he got the ball out on time and played the quarterback position fine. The good news is if Zach Wilson plays the quarterback position at an average level with the tools that he has and the supporting cast in the Jets locker room, they could be a fine to good team. I honestly believe that. I think they're well coached. I think the defense side of the ball is awesome. It sucks that you can't say out loud that you can expect Zach Wilson to play that way every week. And he isn't doing anything crazy. He's getting the ball out on time. He's limiting like these second, third read mistakes where he's bailing out early and taking sacks and all that stuff. Can you expect that every week? No, but the signs are good, right? I thought my favorite part of that Jets game is Zach Wilson taking complete ownership of it. We saw early in his career where he's blaming other things and he's coming too high on his horse. Him saying that's on me, this game's on me, is such a huge step in the right direction, not just for a quarterback, but for like a young professional, for someone who's admittedly very young, who doesn't have a lot of experience, who in the past has not been someone who says, this is on me, this is my fault. To see that maturity, right, that I think we underrate with Zach Wilson is positive. Now, starting the Jets sucks, but I think it is right to bench the Bengals. And then obviously you just got to cut what the Patriots are doing right now. I just don't think they have it.
The only thing I would push back on here, though, is like, in my mind, look, if we're playing pickup basketball in the gym and I miss 17 straight threes and I keep saying, my bad. Yeah, I can admit it's my mistake. Fair. But I still don't trust the actual execution. At some point, the only thing I can trust for the Bengals is they'll either have to shut down Burrow long enough to get him healthy, or he will somehow work through this in a way that gives them the opportunity. I think what Zach Wilson showed us was a 1 week miracle. Oh my God, like I won the lottery. I'm not going to bank on counting this. So I would actually start the Bengals. I would bench the Jets because I trust quarterback. And I'm with you entirely. I think at this point we need to start talking about the Patriots like Fat Elvis. Like Elvis can be the greatest of all time Las Vegas entertainer, but nobody wanted to pay money to go see Fat Elvis at the end of his career. Yeah. At this point, I'm just watching Fat Elvis. And I'm like, this is just a reminder that I used to have great Elvis and now I got Fat Elvis. So I'm out on, I'm cut. I've just called Belichick Fat Elvis, which is not going to help me get any sort of media access to the Patriots. So there we go. There's true professionalism. Speaking of head coaches, let's do the same deal. I'm going to give you 3 head coaches: Brandon Staley and his brilliant decision-making, Matt Eberflus and the absolute abject disaster that is known as the Bears, and obviously Josh McDaniels and whatever we've seen as Raiders fans. You got a bench, start, cut. How you doing it?
I'm immediately starting Staley. I think the decision-making stuff has been overblown. I think that the decisions he's made have been close, and like, I don't like the execution. Like, I think the decisions to go for it on 4th down these past 2 games that they have won but have failed to pick up those key 4th downs are fine. Like, I think those decisions are fine. I think the execution is horrendous. The fullback dive 2 weeks ago, horrendous. And then this quarterback sneak, this tush-push variant that doesn't get it. If I steal this from Danny Heifetz, an analyst here at The Ringer. He says, if you can't get a yard, you shouldn't win the game. And like, that is a bigger statement than going for it or not going for it on 4th down. Like, if you can't get a yard on 4th down to win a game, because if they get that yard, they win, then you don't deserve to win. Now, they're lucky that they do win for another Brandon Staley decision. That 3rd down where they beat the Raiders and they make that decision to pass the football, which puts at risk the time, the clock stopping with an incompletion and giving the time more. But then trusting Herbert, your best player, by a country mile to put a 50-yard seed over the top to Josh Palmer, I think that decision-making, along with the 4th down decision-making from Brandon Staley, has been sound. The execution has been horrendous. A bigger reason to bench or cut Staley in this situation is how bad the defense has been. And now Khalil Mack turned into a superhero against his former team, as he has in his last 2 years with the Chargers. I still think that defense has flaws. And they're swapping picks now for J.C. Jackson. They're making him a healthy scratch. That is a way bigger concern. Brandon Staley is supposed to be this defensive mastermind, and the Chargers defense is not playing well. Going to the bench cut, I think I'm going to bench Eberflus, only because I have to cut McDaniels, I guess, but also because with Eberflus, there have been a lot of things that have been, I think, outside of his control, right? I think the Alan Williams stuff that we don't even know, right? Like, he had to resign for whatever reason. Let's not speculate on the reasoning, but like, his defense coordinator literally had to resign and resigned. And I don't think he expected that going into the year. Other parts of this is the roster is bad. Chase Claypool is bad. Now, they are poorly coached, and he did make these hiring decisions of Alan Williams and Luke Getsy. But there's enough excuses layered into the first 4 weeks of the season where I'm willing to just bench Eberflus and not cut him, especially when you're going toe-to-toe with McDaniels. McDaniels, I've seen enough. I have seen enough. We've all seen enough. He's gotten 2 quarterbacks now. He had the opportunity to trade for Chandler Jones. He had the opportunity to trade for Devontae Adams. And this is just on top of everything else, but his comments after the Aiden O'Connell game are, in my opinion, just like coaching malpractice, like disgusting levels. Like, you have a rookie quarterback that was not supposed to play this year at all. And you can't even like give him this vote of confidence in front of the media, even if you're lying through your teeth about what you feel about his performance. And instead, you just say you got to protect the football. That's what you have to do in this league. It's like, dude, you're not Belichick. You're not that guy. You don't have it. You don't have that gravitas. Belichick can say that whenever he wants. Why? Look at his fingers. He's got the rings. McDaniels, you can't just be a like. I think that's the biggest flaw of all of the former Patriot Belichick underlings. The Belichick tree is they all try to be Belichick from an arrogance and personality and like grit standpoint, like a do your job standpoint. But the only reason that works is because Belichick wins. He wins. Like, every good coach has buy-in. Dan Campbell has buy-in without wins, right? There's other coaches that have created buy-in through their offensive philosophy or their defensive philosophy. Every good coach in the league has buy-in. How you get it has to be variable or diverse to how much you're winning, right? If you're winning every game, you do what the hell you want, dude. You could be like, Aiden O'Connell sucks. Like, we win every game. It sucks. If you have one of the worst head coaching records since 1990, you need to chill out, dude. It's not working. You need to throw a different pitch, try a different speed, because you are not Bill Belichick. You do not have that dog in you, and you need to reel it back and reset.
Especially given the fact that you have one of the best pass rushers, one of the best wide receivers, and last year you had the best running back in the NFL, and still nothing to show for it. Actually, you're chef's kiss to that list, to use the now allowable dictionary term. Okay, so from all this suck, let's do some start bench cut in a barrel of good. Let's go to some of the good here, and we'll go to 3-1 teams. All right, you got to start bench cut. Dolphins, Bills, Chiefs. AFC 3-1 teams. Dolphins, Bills, Chiefs. What do you got?
Cutting any of these teams feels rough. I don't like cutting any of these teams. I think I have to. I'm going to start the Bills. I think the Bills with Dorsey, and we wrote a piece for The Ringer where the headline was, when Josh Allen's clicking, they're unstoppable. It's a little bit of a soft take in that, like, when Josh Allen's playing well, they're playing well. But like, I truly believe it. Like, when Josh Allen is dialed, I don't know if they can be beat, because I think their offensive supporting cast is better than where the Chiefs are. I really like Ken Dorsey as a play caller. And defensively, even with Tre'Davious White now out for the season, I still feel like that defense has enough star power and with Sean McDermott there to be better than what the Chiefs have to offer. Now, the big variable, and it's always been the big variable, is, are you getting hectic week 1 Josh Allen, where you're throwing unnecessary picks and losing games you have to win? Or are you getting what we saw this last week, a dialed Josh Allen that, like, within 2.5 seconds of the snap, can't miss. After that, when he has to create outside of the structure, can't miss. Like, when you have that type of player, I do think that the Bills are unstoppable. It's why I think a lot of people are jumping on this not bandwagon, but jumping on this idea that maybe they are better than the Chiefs. Maybe the Bills are better than the Chiefs. And maybe Josh Allen is closer to Mahomes than we thought. I'm not saying that as an official take.
Would you actually, like, now, because I agree with everything you just said, but let's complicate this a little bit. If I had to bet my house today on Patrick Mahomes or against Patrick Mahomes, I can't bet against Patrick Mahomes.
No.
Everything you just said made sense. But if I'm making this list, I have to start the Chiefs, because I'm not comfortable betting my house. If it was Chiefs, Bills, neutral field right now, I have to bet Chiefs. If it was Chiefs, Dolphins, neutral field right now, I have to bet Chiefs. And it doesn't really matter what I've seen. I've seen the Chiefs win those games when they matter the most. So I have to start Kansas City.
You're right. And I think that's reflective. The Ringer does power rankings every single week, and we ask 9 of our NFL writers to rank the best, obviously rank every team in the NFL. I'm the only one right now that still has the Chiefs 1 because of that reason, right? I still feel that, gun to my head, house on the line, in a saw trap, I'm taking the Chiefs. I'm taking Mahomes. I believe in Mahomes. I believe Mahomes over everything. I think I'm starting the Bills this week because they're coming off a little hot, and I want to give some Bills some love. I think Josh Allen's also playing really well, and I think that game they had against Miami was amazing. Like, amazing. And it shows at the tops of their powers. Now, the consistency is the thing. Is it a roller coaster or is it not? At the tops of their powers, I don't know. They're unstoppable. Whereas the Chiefs, at the tops of their powers, I think they're in the same vein as where Buffalo is, and I think it's a close game. But, like, we've seen, we haven't seen it, but, like, the ceiling is lower for the Chiefs this year, even with Mahomes, right? The ceiling is higher with Buffalo. They have Stephon Diggs. And when Josh Allen is playing as well as he did this past week, he's in this tier with Mahomes. And then the defense is objectively better with McDermott and the talent that they have in Buffalo versus with the talent and what they have in Kansas City. I'm benching the Chiefs. because I think I can't cut the Chiefs. If you cut the Chiefs and you get on a podcast, you might well quit. You can't cut the Chiefs.
So I think we agree, though. That means we're cutting the Dolphins.
The Dolphins. Not at the level that I think Kyle Brandt on Good Morning Football, God bless him, is cutting the Dolphins when he went on this rant that they're not revolutionizing the game. The Dolphins are revolutionizing the game. But they, of any of those three teams, especially, have limitations that those teams don't have. And it starts with Tua. Tua right now is a fantastic quarterback. He's not even in the same room. He might not be in the same apartment building as what Mahomes and Allen are capable of at the tops of their league, at the tops of their powers, right? Tua is a limitation. I think that defense, and it's Kader Kohou specifically, is a limitation, right, in terms of what you can do defensively. Then offensively, that's where they have this supporting cast that puts them in this conversation. Mike McDaniel, Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, and all those other fast dudes that they've got put them in the conversation with the Bills and the Chiefs. But their limitations, specifically with Tua, I think on the defense side of the ball as well, I don't think they still, even if they didn't lose to Buffalo, right? You're still having these conversations on Tua's health is a factor. In addition to that, Tua, when asked to work off his first read, or Tua, when asked to work under pressure, isn't even in the same ballpark as what Mahomes and Allen are capable of.
So let's get some NFC love in here. Powerhouses in the NFC. 49ers, Cowboys, Eagles. Start bench cut. 49ers, Cowboys, Eagles.
49ers are the start. They have the best offense in the NFL by EPA per drive with a quarterback that I don't even know talent-wise is top 10. What they can do with their supporting cast and what Kyle Shanahan is capable of is very similar to what Mike McDaniels is doing in Miami. Obviously, those two are connected for literal reasons. And defensively, yes, they lost D'Amico Ryans, but this thing hasn't skipped a beat, dude. Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, that back end has been able to survive with different cornerbacks. I feel like every single year. They are the best team in the NFC. I believe that in my heart of hearts. I think that you have to then bench the Eagles. The Jalen Hurts stuff is concerning, right? I think Benjamin Solak did a piece recently or had some commentary recently. He's a big Eagles fan. He's an analyst here at the Ringer, where Jalen Hurts is not running with the same physicality he ran from the previous year. And their success rate running with Hurts is not nearly the same it was last year. Neither is their dropback success rate. They've taken a step back. Even though they are 4-0, they've taken a step back. And you can see that for obvious reasons with the Hurts injury. And then also they lost two of their play callers, right? They lost their offensive play caller and they lost their defensive play caller. I think there's going to be learning moments, even through wins, learning moments for the Eagles. And then cutting the Cowboys, you have to cut. You lose to the Cardinals, you got to cut. It's a cut. I mean, you got to be better than that. You have to be better than that. And the national media is licking their chops to talk about Dak Prescott and how he's not that guy and he's not this player. I don't think it is that. I honestly believe they don't have, with Mike McCarthy and with even CeeDee Lamb and all these guys, they don't have what the Eagles have. They don't have what the Niners have in terms of offensive play calling ability, offensive design, or a supporting cast that comes close to what the Eagles have and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert and that offensive line. Defensively, Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox, Jalen Carter. They don't have it. The Cowboys do not have the tools necessary, even with the best of Dak Prescott, to be in the same conversation with the 49ers and the Philadelphia Eagles.
We agree on all that. Let's get one more fun one in here. Hanging in the suite at a football game. Bench, start, cut. Hugh Jackman, Ryan Reynolds, Taylor Swift. It's going to get you in trouble with Swift.
Come on. I'm starting Swift. I'm not an idiot. I'm not an idiot.
You're starting Swift. You got to start Ryan Reynolds. Ryan Reynolds is going to be funnier. He's going to have better stories.
I'll find that out myself. I'll find that out myself. I'll see what Swift brings to the table. I'll verify and bring it back to the group chats. I'll let you guys know how funny everybody is. But you're starting Swift. I mean, she's the most popular person on the planet right now. Literally on the planet. I have to do it. I'm cutting Ryan Reynolds, dude. I don't think he has it. I don't think he's funny. I bet you he's I've watched some movies with Ryan Reynolds in it where this is just bad. Hugh Jackman, I can't say that. I'm also a big Les Mis fan. His role in Les Mis I thought was great. Hugh Jackman's a Broadway guy. I think I resonate more with Hugh Jackman. I see the vision with Jackman. Reynolds is getting the cut. Did you see that movie he was in where he's a freaking video game character? His integrity has fallen off a cliff. I can't do this. Taylor Swift's the start. Jackman's the bench. And give me Reynolds out of this league. He's out of this league.
You said everything that you needed to say that was accurate about Hugh Jackman, by the way, because I would have a hard time benching Hugh Jackman. There are so many great stories from Hugh Jackman. The actor and the musician. And like, by the way, Greatest Showman. Like Greatest Showman is one of my favorite things of all time.
Incredible.
Like I would have to be tempted to start Hugh Jackman just so that I could see if maybe we could do like a Greatest Showman duet while we're in this suite.
I don't hate it.
On this. Like my debate is Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman. And maybe there's a bias given my background in life. I just like, what am I going to talk to Tay-Tay about? Like, I'm just not that infatuated.
Find something, dude. You better find something.
Look,
you better find something. I think it's worth it.
As this is going to get clipped off and I'm going to get killed by Swifties, I'll just remind you that one of my close friends is her drummer. That's my way of telling everybody I love Taylor Swift and I have nothing but love for Taylor Swift. But she gets benched. She gets cut in this one. For me, she's 100%. She's out. She's cut. I'm going Ryan Reynolds. I'm going Hugh Jackman. And I may think about that on the day, but I'm cutting Taylor Swift. I will never cut you, my friend. Obviously, you guys need to check him out on The Ringer, doing great work. I appreciate not only your brilliance and insight with Taylor Swift and horror movies, but also with going through this game with me, brother. Thanks for hanging out with us. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Let's get some expertise coming in the form of David Helman, hanging out with us, host of the NFL on Fox podcast. Look, Helman, first and foremost, your work highly regarded. When I started asking around, I was like, look, I need a Cowboys guru. I need an expert that's going to be able to walk me through this Cowboys 49ers game with brilliance. Your name came up multiple times. So, like, question number one, what's it like to be just wildly respected and brilliant?
Oh, well, I talk about accepting compliments when I go to therapy. So this is, I'm going to try to grow and lean into that and say, it feels good. It feels really good. It's nice to know that 10 years of being way too involved with the Cowboys is paying off. It's a roller coaster. I think maybe you would describe it as Stockholm syndrome, but it's led to some really cool places in my career, and people like to talk about the Cowboys. So it's been a grind to get to this point, but we're seeing some dividends. Happy about it.
I'm going to give you two pieces of information you didn't ask for. Number one, if you've never tried it, I had a friend suggest taking a like squishy animal with me to therapy, like a squishy stuffed animal. Oh, that's so good. I'm just telling you, it makes me feel better. Like feel like I'm getting a squishy hug in the middle of it. And frankly, I had breakfast this morning with a buddy that has spent the last several years covering a much less popular team than the Cowboys. And the number of times he said, man, couldn't I just gotten into this beat with the Cowboys? Because like then at least people care, you know?
Dude, look, I fell into the Cowboys. Like people ask me like, they're like, oh, so were you a fan of the Cowboys? Like how did that happen? And you just go where the job is. You go where there's a job opening. I was like, no, man, I didn't know or care about the Cowboys at all when I got hired, but you fall into covering the most polarizing and visible team in the world. And yeah, I know what a privilege it is. I'm sure it can be. Covering a team is a grind no matter what. But yeah, at least when it's the Cowboys, people always want to talk about your work.
So polarizing up and down. Let's just get right to the weirdest part of the Cowboys season, because I feel like I was out here flying the flag and I'm like, all right, 49ers, Cowboys, two best teams in the NFC. I feel comfortable with that. And then the Cardinals game happened. And I even went back this week and rewatched the Cardinals game because I thought maybe edibles had me seeing it the wrong way. Like maybe I'm suddenly looking at it. I'm like, hey, I missed something. No, like the Cowboys got dominated at the line of scrimmage by the Cardinals. And I can't figure out what happened. You tell me.
Yeah, what's funny is doing a league-wide podcast now, this is how it always works. Like there was a week or so there where I was like, do we even have to play these games against the Cardinals and the Patriots? Can we just skip to week 5? Like we don't need to see these games. And sure enough, they dropped one of them. Look, run defense has been a problem for the Cowboys going back to last year. That's why they traded for Jonathan Hankins in the middle of last season. That's why they used their first-round draft pick on Mozzie Smith out of Michigan to shore that thing up. It's clearly still an issue. I would say, in my opinion, it's got less to do with the front than it does with the Cowboys linebacker situation. Leighton Vander Esch has been there for years. Still a good player. Whether it's injury or just age, I would argue that he's lost a step or two. And then you've got Damone Clark, who's still a young player figuring out the position. They lose their rookie draft pick to Marvion Overshown, who I don't want to say he looked like he was going to be a star, but he looked like he was going to be a really useful piece of this defense. They lose him in training camp. So now you've got those two guys, and you're bringing safeties down to play linebacker. You're asking guys to play a new position because you're so thin at the spot. And it looked like it against the Cardinals. Credit to Arizona. that offense is so much more interesting than I think anybody. Just some of the stuff they're doing, and the fact that, I mean, maybe Hollywood Brown and I guess what's left of Zach Ertz was like the only thing you knew about that offense heading in, but they're very fun, and they took it to the Cowboys. I think they were out of position, they were misdirected. Whether you're reading your own headlines or you're just overly confident, I think the Cowboys came in and said, we're going to do what we do. We're going to play with our hair on fire, fly toward the ball. And the Cardinals just used misdirect and good blocking scheme to confuse the hell out of them. And what's funny, the Cowboys I thought they tightened things down in the second half of that game, but they gave up something like 12 explosive rushes in the first half. And I think that's the thing that they're going to have to guard against from now on. And I do think it's interesting. Kyle Shanahan, great at creative blocking, great at getting guys into space, great at using fullbacks and tight ends to take guys out of the play. So I hope that they learn some lesson from that Cardinals game, because I'm going to go ahead and guess Kyle Shanahan's going to try to steal a few things to use against them.
Yeah, this feels like the wrong week to be a team that's struggling against the run, especially not just with Shanahan's mindset, but also, I mean, let's face it, Christian McCaffrey is going to challenge everything you know about discipline, right? But the hard part about this conversation to me is the way we talk about the Cowboys defense, because I feel hypocritical at times coming in and talking about, well, this defense can do so many different things. There are pieces to this defense that are great. But even on some of our shows on Yahoo this week, the conversation has been Dan Quinn going to be a head coach in the league. Again, look at what the Cowboys do defensively. And you're right. They have this big liability that only showed up against the Cardinals to this level. But in my mind, it's almost like we gloss over that. We're such a pass-happy world in the way we cover offenses and defenses that, like, if you're not particularly great at running the ball or stopping the run, it feels like we don't talk about that till we get to like mid-November when we realize that's a necessity for playoff teams.
It's an interesting thing that's happening in the NFL. Like, when the season started, you saw all those stories about, like, is the deep ball dead? And guys like Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen are having to combat against a lot of too high shell. And by virtue of that, I think teams are recognizing the importance of being able to run the ball. Like, okay, if you're going to do everything in your power to keep us from taking chunks down the field in the passing game, then we need to have a reliable way to move the ball. And running is the easiest way to do that. So, yeah, I mean, it remains a hugely important part of football. It's not as sexy, and the rules of the game are designed to let people try to pass the ball for huge totals. But I think we're cycling back into an era where you see the importance of that. I think it's a huge part of why Kyle Shanahan's been so successful. I mean, people worry about the passing totals, but I think that's what the Niners have always done better than everybody. And yeah, you're right. I mean, fortunately for the Cowboys, the way they like to play defense plays into their hands in a lot of matchups, because if you can get an explosive play, put somebody down early with a defensive touchdown or creating a short field, if you can put your opponent down 10-0, force them out of favorable running situations, now you're playing to the strength of having Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence. But as the Cardinals showed, if the Cowboys wind up in a more even game where you have your whole playbook available, that's something you got to guard against. We can't say that they're invincible after what we saw just a couple weeks ago.
Doesn't that speak to, let's say it this way, the lack of patience? Like I mentioned Madden a lot. I used to play a lot of Madden in life, not as much now, but mention Madden a lot. Like when you're playing somebody in Madden, they just want to chuck the ball down the field. And the more they just want to chuck the ball down the field, the more I'm going to come in and say, all right, I will run the football and take the ball for the entire first quarter and just kick your ass. Like there's a level of patience, and where we've seen the downfall at times over the years for Mahomes, been a lack of patience. For Josh Allen last year, been pushing the ball where he doesn't need to push the ball. Like right now, it feels like almost when you're playing the Cowboys more than anybody, that defense requires that you just remain patient, because if you decide you're going to get into drop back, chuck it down the field mode, you're inevitably going to take a sack or create a turnover that's going to put you at a disadvantage. And then you're putting good money at bad. Like the more you're chasing, the more you continue to chase. Like it feels like the right game plan against the Cowboys is just to, hey, even if we don't run the ball incredibly well, just forcing them to commit to defending it throughout the course of 4 quarters will change the way that this game plays out.
I think you're 100% correct. Like, it's generalizing a little bit, but in my opinion, that is the method to slow down these incredible offenses these days, is to say, how many units in the NFL, there's 32 offenses in the NFL, how many of them are talented enough and have a good enough quarterback who is a good enough decision maker where they can consistently drive the ball over the course of 8, 10, 12 plays and score? How many of them can do that before they get frustrated, before they make a mistake? And honestly, you've seen it with the Cowboys here in the recent past. The Cowboys have been one of the best offenses in the NFL for 5 years going. But last year, whenever they would try to take their shots, things would go horribly for them. Dak winds up leading the league in interceptions. And it was almost always, not always, but almost always, when he would get aggressive and try to take a shot 18, 20 yards down the field. And I think that's what defenses want, is to say, you can't play mistake-free football over the course of an entire game if we're playing this way. And I think that's an interesting component of this matchup, is the Niners and the Cowboys both have been playing efficient, mostly mistake-free football. Obviously, the Cowboys have had their struggles in the red zone, but I mean, Dak has been playing as efficiently as he ever has. They've gotten into the red zone more than anybody in the league. So I can't wait to see who makes the critical mistake in this game, because neither one of these offenses has really been doing that so far this season.
Well, and I spent a year hosting a college football show with A.J. McCarron, and A.J. obviously a ton of success at Alabama. And one thing he said that, Saban constantly preaches to all Alabama quarterbacks is take what the defense will give you, and eventually they'll give you the game. He said, but he also acquiesced that that's against the intuition of a quarterback. Like, take what the defense will give you, and eventually they'll give you the game, means don't press too hard. And that's just the opposite of what many quarterbacks are used to doing. But to your point, Brock Purdy's been a living, breathing, eating example of that, right? Like, Brock Purdy is out here he ain't trying to out Mahomes anybody. He's just out there saying, I will take what the defense will give me, and eventually they'll give me the game. Like, he's efficient, he's smart, he doesn't make a lot of mistakes. So when you look at this Cowboys defense against Brock Purdy, how do they do it?
I can't wait to see what Dan Quinn's got for him. I mean, we saw Wink Martindale blitz the hell out of Purdy in week 3. Granted, I don't think the Giants have the horses that the Cowboys do, but Brock Purdy handled it like a champ. He hung in there. He didn't make the mistakes. And then third, fourth quarter, they bring a zero blitz and he hits Deebo Samuel for the touchdown that kind of puts the game away. He's held up under pressure. Obviously, Kyle Shanahan's going to draw things up to keep him away from pressure in the first place. But I mean, if I was Dan Quinn, and I'm not qualified to do that, but it sounds good to me to trust that you have one of the best front fours in the game. I mean, DeMarcus Lawrence and Micah they're one of the best pairs of edge rushers in the league. And you've got other guys that can come behind them: Dorrance Armstrong, Sam Williams, Dante Fowler. I would trust those guys to get home often enough and just clog the rest of the field with guys that can get into the passing lanes. I know Brock Purdy only threw one incompletion last week, but I think this Cowboys defense is a little bit more talented than the Cardinals, even though, yes, the Cardinals did beat them just a couple weeks ago. If it were me, I'd be trying to rush 4 as often as possible. And, somebody gets a hand on, somebody hits Purdy as he's releasing a throw, and hopefully it winds up in the hands of one of your guys. But I can't wait to see what Quinn eventually settles on, because the conversation around Brock Purdy is fascinating to me, because people try to discredit the guy, and I get why. Do I think Brock Purdy is one of the 10 best quarterbacks in the NFL? No. But he is playing amazing football. Yes, it's because he's got a supporting cast, but that's not Brock Purdy's fault. Just go execute the offense, and he does it amazingly. And we know that the Niners haven't always been able to do that. They had Jimmy G, and it didn't look this good. So I think we can say, no, Brock Purdy is not on the elite level, while also saying he's doing a hell of a job. I don't think those things have to be mutually exclusive.
I'll use my 80s Transformer type reference here. Sometimes football is like Voltron to me. You need the right robots stacked in the right place to make a mega robot. Brock Purdy feels like the right piece of Voltron here, right? Because you're right. If any quarterback could do it, would they have lost in the playoffs last year without Brock? I think we have to acknowledge that it's not that Brock's the top 10 quarterback, but in this system with these players in this environment, they all sort of like Josh Groban raised me up. Like they all come together and they form this one Voltron robot that works.
Like same thing we always say about the schedule. Like, oh, you haven't played anybody good. Okay, this isn't college football where your athletic director schedules Georgia 5 years ahead of time. This is the NFL where you play what's in front of you. We sit like, it's like, oh, well, Brock Purdy wouldn't be good on a different offense. So what? Is he going to magically wake up one Sunday and have to play for the Rams? No, he's the 49ers quarterback. Like, that's not how this works. So I don't care. Yes, he's benefiting from his supporting cast, but he's doing a really, really good job, and a job that other quarterbacks in that position haven't been able to do. So I don't get why Brock Purdy makes people so mad. I think he's doing a hell of a job, even if he's not Patrick Mahomes.
So how's this game play out before we get you out of here?
Oh, I mean, look, I called it Stockholm syndrome earlier in our talk. Like, I against all reasoning, I picked the Cowboys to go to the Super Bowl this year. I've been saying since April, if not now, then when? Like, if this Cowboys team can't do it, then what Cowboys team can? Obviously, nothing about the Super Bowl is going to be decided in week 5, but they do need to prove that they can win this type of game. I mean, a road game against the team that sent them home in the playoffs 2 years in a row, this would carry a lot of weight. And I don't know exactly how they do it. Dak Prescott's got to play mistake-free, which fortunately for the Cowboys, he has been, with the exception of that one end zone interception, which you're down double digits late in the fourth quarter at that point anyway. That type of stuff happens. Like, Dak is playing as efficient as he ever has. He really seems like he has a mastery of this offense. So do I feel good about it? No. But am I picking the Cowboys to go into Santa Clara and sneak out of here with like a 3-point win? Yeah, why not? I just hope it's a great game. But if the Cowboys can figure out a way to get past the Niners, it would do a lot for my confidence that this team is different.
The one thing we know is if they win, it's a conversation piece. If they lose, it's a conversation piece. If they blow them out, it's a conversation piece. If they get blown out, it's a conversation piece. No matter what happens, we'll be talking about it.
It's the Dallas Cowboys, baby. You love them or you hate them, but you feel a type of way about them, and that's the beauty of it. So.
Well, I know you'll cover it tremendously in the NFL on Fox podcast. My friend, thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks for all the insight and brilliance. Got to come back, hang out with me again.
Yeah, this was fun, man. Anytime you need me, let's do it.
All right, I've been looking forward to this all stinking week long, because sometimes you got to talk to somebody that sees the entire picture, that knows what we don't. And that's what we're about to do with the great Michael Lombardi hanging out with us. Lombardi's able to give us the insight from the inside, right? Like on what we need to know about all of this. And Mike, I was thinking of you this week, and it's weird for one grown man to say that to another, but yeah, like I was just sitting there thinking, because I need your insight. We watched a week here where J.C. Jackson, I remember everybody chasing J.C. not that long ago. Yeah. Now all of a sudden he gets traded. As a Raiders fan, I watched Chandler Jones, for reasons far bigger than football, no longer with the team. We understand that. Randy Gregory gets cut by the Broncos. We see all these huge dollar deals that suddenly fall apart. From a front office standpoint, I've been waiting all week to ask you this. Like, what do you do when you know the organization or yourself have put a ton of money into a player and you just have to let him go?
It's a sunk cost. I mean, that's the reality. There's no way I would have walked into Al Davis's office after paying J.C. Jackson all that money and getting 397 plays out of him. I mean, I would have basically been hung at Town Square. I mean, there's just no chance, right? So that you don't want to do that. But I think it's a sunk cost, and you've got to get rid of them. Look, you assume risk whenever you sign some other player from another team. J.C. Jackson, there was questions about his knee. Was it going to stay healthy? The scheme always helped him. Nobody wants to talk about that in free agency. It's the player, the player, the player. It's not the scheme. Well, sometimes the scheme helps the player look better than maybe he really is. And so they go ahead and give him that contract. Now that they give him that contract, he gets hurt, unfortunately. And then in the infinite wisdom of Brendan Staley, he decides to put him one-on-one against Tyreek Hill, the best receiver in football. Like, that's not fair to J.C. Jackson, right? So that didn't work out. Gregory was a risk. Everybody knew it. The reason he signed in Denver is because, remember, Dallas wanted to have clauses in his contract to prevent any of the off-the-field stuff that he had always gotten in trouble with. He didn't want to do that. He signed with Denver. So, and then Chandler, Look, going back to when he was in New England, there has been issues off the field in terms of mental health. That's clear. I hope he gets, and he's a really wonderful kid, I hope he gets the help he needs because it seems like he's screaming for it in some of those tweets. So it's really a risk. You take a risk, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But the worst thing you can do is keep going down when you know.
But, okay, so let me just drill into this for a second because I will acquiesce. You know my music background, right? And I've often said, if you put 10 violinists in the room and watching another violinist play, we won't agree on whether they're good at anything. Like, I understand that you can have 10 experts. Hell, most people listening can't get 10 friends to agree on what pizza in town is the best pizza. I understand that. But when you start looking at a player and you mention scheme, like from an organization standpoint, who's responsible for figuring out what that player that you're thinking of investing in would look like in your scheme? It just feels like there's too many experts to have as many breakdowns as we see.
Well, the general manager should. That's part of what Al Davis used to say to me all the time. You've got to scout inside. You got to know the scheme. You got to know the players and the plays. Like, for example, Pittsburgh. I've been in the league 35 years. I saw Michael Lewis interview that Sam Friedman, whatever his last name is, on the crypto stuff. And the guy said, anybody over 46 is worthless. Okay, well, that's great. I see that. All right. But experience does matter. And I know from my experience, anytime the Steelers want to get rid of a player, it's probably not a good idea to want you to go try to trade for them because they're too smart, they're too good. And so when they want to get rid of Chase Claypool and you trade a high second-round pick for him, you got to know something more than they know. And they're never wrong. Like, they're never wrong. I mean, they let a guy, Neil O'Donnell, going all the way back. He signed with the Jets. How'd that work out for the Jets? After 2 years, he was gone. So my point is, you got to understand the team that's getting rid of the player knows him better than you do. Knows him better than you do. And so if they're not trying to sign him with you, then there's a problem.
This is just the reminder now, and I will say it to every single fan when we get to free agency next year. You don't win building your team through free agency. We can keep telling people that so they're blue in the face. These are living, breathing examples of why we make March too big of a deal when we start talking about teams turning the corner. Now, I do want, part of why we love talking to you is you have a different mindset. Let's take a look at some of the biggest topics in the NFL and maybe where the mindset should be. And one of those is Josh Allen. Josh Allen comes in, the Bills come in and get a massive statement win over the Dolphins. But in your mind, there's something we're missing here, right?
Yeah, well, I think it's the change of the offense. He's playing so good, right? He's now a point guard, okay? Before, in the offense, he was a shooting guard, okay? He was trying to do way too much, and he was trying to control the pace of the game. Now he's a point guard. Now he's dishing. But here's the thing about Josh Allen that's so unique. In 59 career wins, 45 of them have been more than 7 points. I mean, this guy's played well. But now he's dishing the ball. He's playing point guard, and they'll run the ball. Before, he was the main runner. The last time they played Jacksonville, it was Urban Meyer's last win, believe it or not. In that game, Josh Allen carried the ball, was the leading rusher with 6 carries. I think it was a 9-6 game. They turned it over and they lost, right? So they've changed who they are. And they run the ball with Cook. They run the ball out of 12 personnel. And he's no longer saying, I got to carry it. Now, he's not John Stockton. He's Magic Johnson. He's big. He can score if you want him to, like he did on that play where he took the ball and ran it in the end zone. But he's playing point guard at a level that is the best I've ever seen him play.
I love your point guard analogy because it also speaks to pace and understanding and patience and all of these things that great point guards have. And it's something we've already talked about in this episode with some other people, that there is this level of patience at the quarterback position, especially in the way you're being defended by modern defenses. You can't just sit back there like it's a video game and heave the ball downfield. I love your point guard analogy because it feels like when Josh Allen is at his best is when he's patient and he's just letting the game come to him.
And that makes the Buffalo Bills so much better. Because remember, Buffalo's a small defense. They play nickel defense on first down. They played on second. They played on third. There was no big guys on the field against Miami. And so they need to get the lead. They need to play from in front because they don't want to get into a kind of a game where they've got to get into big personnel. They want to use their pass rush to extend the lead. They don't want to use their pass rush to keep them in the game. And I think by Allen playing the way he does, they're hard to beat.
From a quarterback playing lights out to a quarterback not playing well, Joe Burrow, I know, is also on your mind. Like, look, it's hard not to make a big deal of the Bengals being terrible because they had high expectations. But Joe Burrow just hasn't looked right. And to you, it's even bigger than that.
Well, I mean, when you just go to one thing we don't do enough of, Fitz, is we don't look at the quarterback throwing chart like he's a shooter in basketball, right? Like, where do you like to shoot? Where do you like to shoot the ball from? And then we'll defend that area. Well, Burrow's, he's always been very good at making throws on first down. Now he can't make them. On third and short, he's not even making any. He's 52% on third and 4 and 6. 52%. Those are the easy throws. So he's not accurate with the ball. He can't run. He's got 8 rushes for 3 yards. Last year, he ran 27 times for first down. He can't push off them. If you just said to me, who's the worst quarterback in the league, and you had no history behind it, right now, Joe Burrow is playing like that. And it has everything to do with his calf. It has everything to do with their lack of offensive line. And the fact that they can't really get anything going. I mean, their defense is playing 32 minutes a night. They can't play 32 minutes. Their offense needs to control the ball. But because Burrow's not playing well, they can't.
So then I'm going to make you the GM then of the Bengals. Are you telling the coaching staff, hey, we should sit him until he gets healthy?
I'm telling the coaching staff, we can't just come out in one formation anymore. I mean, Chase doesn't have any touchdowns. He's 2 yards below where he was last year, right? I'm saying, look, we got to mix it up. We can't throw fastballs anymore. Got to throw a little curve. How about a slider? How about a changeup? How about 12 personnel? How about we get in some 13? How about if we try to get a running back going? Mixon can't. They're missing Perrine from last year. Mixon's not the same back. Their offensive line's not the same. They got to rebuild it. I think what happens to a lot of teams is they think they can get back to the top of the mountain without starting at base camp. And that's what the Bengals look like to me.
It's interesting you say that because I constantly think about sometimes football like baking. Like, I know cooking analogies mean like the inner fat kid comes out. But baking is precision. And the funny thing is we focus on the cake or the icing, but it takes every single ingredient being exactly measured to the exact right way to make a perfect cake. And sometimes in football pop culture, we focus on one guy. But what you just mentioned is so powerful to me because there are tons of little nuances that are a step worse for the Bengals. And when you combine those nuances not being at the same level, with Burrow being injured and not being able to play at the same level, with the coaching staff seemingly one-dimensional in what they're doing, all of these little things take a Super Bowl contender and make them look like one of the worst teams in the league. It's funny how the wheels fall off. And it's why I think, frankly, like this concept of, hey, don't worry about it, we'll get them next year, or we're in the middle of our window. Like, I just don't think in modern sports, windows exist as much anymore. Like, you better go out and win right now because you don't know what the hell is going to happen next year.
And you have to redefine your team every year. Look at Buffalo. See, Cincinnati's in the same place Buffalo was last year, only Burrow can't run like Allen did. They were stagnant on offense, Buffalo. When you took Diggs away, they didn't have anybody, right? But now Buffalo went to 12 personnel. They draft Kincaid. They got 2 tight ends, Knox and Kincaid. Cincinnati didn't do that. Cincinnati's been in 11 personnel. They're in shotgun all the time. Buffalo's under center. The trend in the league is moving back to under center. And Cincinnati's a day late and a dollar short.
It's an adjust, counter adjust league. And one of the guys that's frankly out there making everybody adjust right now is Anthony Richardson. Now, I covered him a lot in college. I think in Florida, what you saw were times an inconsistent passer. And I think sometimes in the course of the early portion of his career, you see an inconsistent passer. We all knew that was going to be part of it. But what you see from Anthony Richardson looks like it could be special, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's a combination of Cam Newton, but a better thrower. He's got a little bit of Josh Allen in him, but he's probably faster. He's a little bit of everything. And the throws he's making down the field is really impressive. In that fourth quarter against the Rams, he was really good. Now, is he, I'm a 76er fan, and it's a horrible existence in life to be that. But he reminds me a lot of Iverson. Iverson's box score would be 9 of 30 from the floor. But he would make 2 plays to win the game. And you would forget about the 9 of 30, that he shot less than 33%. Like, he did something spectacular to win the game. And I think Richardson's going to be like that. He may not be a 65% thrower, but he's going to be maybe 58. But those 2 plays he makes, no one else can make. And I think what Steichen's been able to do with him, without really any weapons around them, they have no really great skill. Now, maybe they get Taylor back. Zach Moss has been great. But I think he has been really better. When I first saw him, Jason, I loved him. I thought this guy's could be the Heisman. And then the 9 games he played at Florida, I didn't see it. Now he's back to doing it. It's going to be interesting. Last year, Philly played Tennessee. Philly destroyed them because Hurts ran the ball, moved all over. Steichen will have a good plan for Tennessee this weekend.
I think that's such a huge part of it, the coach and the system, but also everything you just said. And I tell football fans this all the time, NFL fans, go find your smartest college football analyst and really listen to them, absorb, because everything you just said about Anthony Richardson mirrors so much of what I heard when, hey, if this guy can do these 2 or 3 plays in this game, I can fix the rest of them. I can never coach somebody to be able to make those 2 or 3 plays. I can fix the bad. I can't manufacture that level of good. It's exactly what you're saying, and it speaks to how good he can be if he gets those reps in that time, I think.
Yeah, no question. And the sky's the limit in the offense. And as they get better skill around him, like when Hurts got A.J. Brown, and he got better skill around him, then he took off.
Now, sort of the opposite is happening with the Rams right now. I don't think a lot of us thought much of the skill players for the Rams, but when you've got skill players that might have a future and a quarterback playing lights out, like, let's give Stafford some credit. Stafford is absolutely destroying it, and I know you love what he's doing.
I mean, I think he's great. And I think McVay's great, too. You know, we make such a big deal about the receivers at the Rams. And I can tell you this, from watching the game tape, McVay does a lot to get the receivers open. When it's man coverage, he works picks, under routes. He's really a great game planner. He's really good. And when everybody, Cooper Kupp's not going to play, I thought they would beat Seattle because I thought they would cover the spread against Seattle because McVay does such a good job of getting guys open, you know, and he gave San Francisco the biggest test of the year, but it's because Stafford's been lights out. He's been unbelievable. Now, he got hurt in the fourth quarter. They say he's healthy this week, but if he falls apart now, just so we know this, it's all over with. None of we won't be talking about any of those receivers anymore. It's Stafford and McVay keeping this thing afloat.
It's interesting to me only because we so often ask quarterbacks to elevate. And then when we see quarterbacks elevating, sometimes we forget to acknowledge it, right? Like
That's right.
This is the comfort. And you know this better than anybody. I think people need to remember. Sometimes it's about comfort of scheme between coach and quarterback. When you find that right tag team, it's almost unstoppable.
And they should have beaten Cincinnati, except the problem was Jackson got hurt. This week, they moved Noteboom over to left tackle. Now, if you're interested in this game, Noteboom and Jackson didn't practice yesterday. If neither one of those guys play, it's going to be hard for Stafford because he's going to get hit too much.
This is the brilliance that Michael brings us every week. Check out the Lombardi line, which airs on VSiN weekdays, 1 p.m. Eastern, and weekends, 10 a.m. Eastern, as well as his weekly GM Shuffle podcast. And check out Michael's NFL takes at VSiN. That's VSIN.com. My friend, thanks for hanging out with me as always.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks for hanging out with us, guys. I'm back on Sunday night with Frank Schwab for Sunday Night Blitz. You don't want to miss that. I'm going to be honest with you. It's gotten heated lately, so it will continue to do that this week. And follow us on Twitter. I'm at Jason Fitz. Thanks to all of our guests for coming on. You can follow Stone. Stone's doing God's work. He's doing all the hard work here. I just sit here and look pretty. Follow Stone at SJ Rochelle. He's our producer behind the glass. And, of course, make sure you're out there leaving us a 5-star review. Rate the podcast. Subscribe to the podcast. Tell everybody. Tell your friends, your family, your enemies. Tell everybody to hang out with us all the time. We will be back next Thursday. You never know who's going to show up, but I'm going to tell you this. They're going to be awesome. We're going to have fun, and it's going to get weird. That's coming up, as always, on Zero Blitz.